If you want to end racism in Norman, Oklahoma or anywhere else, listen to this podcast. This is Justin Westmoreland, and you're listening to the Fully Alive podcast, where we integrate physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual relational health so that we can become a fully alive community together. So welcome back to the Fully Alive podcast. This is episode 11. I don't have enough fingers to count that many now. So we're up to 11, and this is the second in our series of the Fully Alive 10 Commandments. Now, Fully Alive, of course, is we want to become those who are healthy physically, spiritually, mentally, and relationally, and become a community to support that kind of health in wherever we are. So online, in real life, etc. Well, there was a real life event in our hometown this week in Norman, Oklahoma that I feel like we got to talk about. And that is that there's someone on Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning took spray paint and graffitied a bunch of statues, artwork, buildings in our town and wrote really racist and hateful messaging on those places. I mean, talking parking lots, every place else. But the real key was what was said. You know, what was said in the messaging, because it was awful. So racist messaging. So what do you do about that? How do you fix that kind of stuff? Now, they believe there's someone already apprehended who did these things, which is excellent. But the police are doing a good job on that. But how do you create a culture that values other people and doesn't hate them or express hatred and racism, you know, based on superiority, based on culture or skin color, etc. So we're actually, this is going to work really well into the second commandment of being fully alive, this contemporary story that we're dealing with here. So what is it that's going to really help you and me to become a more loving, relationally healthy community? Well, you got to ask, what is the deal with racism? Why does racism exist at all? And what's wrong with it? What's wrong? What is wrong with it? I asked my father about this question just this week about, why do you think racism is wrong? He's just like, well, it just is. And I feel like that's as far as we can get there. We just know it shouldn't be, but why is it so? Why should someone have value that goes deeper than his or her culture, skin color, etc.? Why are we valuable, and why ought we value other people and not judge them based on these superficial things? Well, in our tradition, we don't want to just have a bunch of imperatives thrown at you. Like, hey, you need to do this, do that thing, do that other thing. We believe that the scriptural worldview begins with an indicative and leads to an imperative. Here's the way things are, and in light of that, here's how we ought to behave. But you can't miss the why behind why you ought to do something, because that's the very strength that gives you the ability to accomplish the imperatives or the commands or the rules, the laws of life. So if you don't understand what you are, who you are, what kind of community you're supposed to be, then you have no power to do what you got to do, which is either getting in shape healthily, physically, mentally, relationally, spiritually, etc. You can't do it if you don't have the indicative right. So what are we? What are we? Is this just something culturally we've been taught that it's wrong to be racist? Are we just reacting to a previous time in history that we didn't think was as cool, and now we want to be much more enlightened and better? No, that's not it at all. This thing goes way beyond our brief history in America, our brief history here, but it goes to our very history as human beings. What are we? When you look in the mirror, what do you see? When you smile, something smiles back at you, an image. So we want to look at who we are, and we're going to do number 2 commandment today, the second commandment of being fully alive, which is read the label. Read the label. This is a huge, very important command for you to be healthy, relationally, physically, spiritually. You have to know what you're dealing with. If you look at a person, what is that person? What is in this person? What is it? What is the food you're putting in your body? Reading the label helps you. Now, I showed you last week the MyFitnessPal, which is a great tool. If you don't have a label, you can put the food into the phone, into the FitnessPal app, and it will tell you what is in it. Reading the label is huge to understand what calories you're putting in, what ingredients. You want to talk about organic versus non-organic, processed versus non-processed. You can look on the label and see what is in a food you're putting in your body. So reading the label is important. So when we look at a person, what is the person? Well, we all look a little different. We all got, some of us are boys, some of us are girls, some of us have different skin color, some of us are tall, some of us are short, some of us are slim, and some of us are a little more girthy. What are we? We're all different looking. We all have different attributes about us, but we're all basically the same. We all got two eyes, we got two ears, we got a mouth, we got a nose, we got two arms, two legs. We look alike in a lot of ways too. So we all speak, we all communicate. Even if we can't speak, we communicate. We create things, we invent things, we imagine things, we dream things, we write songs, we write poetry, we create, and we love. We're made to do these things. I think these are not just accidents that have developed over a long evolutionary time, but these things that we do are very much a part of our being, of what we were designed to be. So you're talking hatred is actually a dysfunction of what we ought to be doing. Judging people based on externals is a dysfunction or disorder of our ordered living. And how do we know that? Well, we got to look at what we are. Well, we're made to be in a loving relationship with all those around us. Why? Because we're in the image of God. If you look at your label, this is your label. Let me read to you Genesis 1:26 through 27. All right, listen to this. Then God said, this is Genesis 1, the last day of creation. He says, let us make mankind in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over the livestock, over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. Man and woman, people, we all have a common origin. And what God says, he labels us. He puts a label on each of us and says, image of God. That is enormously important if we're going to think about why racism is absolutely wrong, why hating people or viewing yourself as better than another person is absolutely 100% wrong. Everyone around you is an image of God. I would argue when you're at the gym, what might be even more helpful to you than the resistance, than the time under tension, which we preach about on Fully Live, than the progressive overload, than the cardio, what might be more important to you is to actually take out these earbuds, take out the Beats by Dre, and actually listen to somebody else, greet someone else, get to know someone else. Being greeted is probably maybe more healthy for you than sweating. You actually have maybe more anxiety about meeting a new friend or meeting a new person than getting in your yoga pants or your gym clothes and sweating. It's like we put in these earphones because they give us a little bit of comfort. We have control. We can listen to what we want to. But taking the earphones out really is to your benefit a lot of times. I want you to follow me. As I talked about last week, listen only to me. Let me demonstrate to you how to live a fully alive life as best as I can. And you get behind me and follow me and listen to me. Well, I told you a lot of things last week, but let me tell you this. Do this. Don't listen to whatever you want to listen to, but actually get to know somebody in your gym. Whether it's a trainer, whether it's another person going along with you, a workout partner, whether it's somebody you don't know, but getting known and being known and knowing other people is one of the most helpful things. And the enemy to friendship at the gym is the headphones, because you're unapproachable. You can't be approached, you can't hear anybody else because you got these nice headphones on, they're blocking it out. So our listening to things is not terrible. It's not the worst thing. It's not an excuse for the flesh and blood relationships that we need in life. So rant over. We got you. Follow me. I would argue that the longevity of my fitness transformation is precisely because I have relationships at every gym I go to. I know people there. They know me. There's a greeting there. There's a relationship there. There's a camaraderie there, a collegiality. We value each other, and there's dignity there. That's what we're looking for. That's why racism is wrong, is that it strikes at the dignity of the person. It says, I am not a humble person just like them. I am above them, and it reduces their dignity or worth. And so smiling with people, talking with people, laughing with people, joking with people, sharing the experience with other people is vitally important, especially people that are different than us, okay? Because we're all different. So what is it to be human? The Bible is all about we are image of God. That is our label. So image of God. Let's talk about that. You know, where do you learn this? How do you get to know this? You got people going around all the time saying, hey, you're God. You can be God. You can make your own God. You can create your own way of being God. And you don't have to accept a traditional God. You can be God, and you're part of God even. So people will say things like that. You are God. Well, that's a misunderstanding. That's just making stuff up. You know, what basis would you have to even say that? Now, a lot of people maybe not saying I'm God, but they're saying I'm nobody. I'm nothing. You know, a lot of people are very disappointed in themselves and look in the mirror and they're thinking, well, I've failed and I'm judging myself and I'm nobody. I'm trash. When you say that, you're also wrong. You're not trash. You're not nobody, but you're also not God. You are an image of God. And you see that image part, you're not the thing. Okay, so in a lot of sense, you got to have some humility there and realize I need God and I am derived from Him, so my purpose is defined by the maker of me. I'm an image. I'm a pot, a clay pot of a potter who's molded me. And so you can't say I'm God. You can't say I'm nothing. You have to say what this God says that you're to be and exist like. So this is your purpose. Now, when you think about the Bible, people think the Bible's all about, just God. Well, we've already seen that the Bible has a lot to say about people. And John Calvin in the Calvin's Institutes, book 1, chapter 1, paragraph 1 says, hey, you cannot know God without understanding yourself, and you really can't understand yourself unless you start to understand who God is. So any God-centered theology, and you talk about God without talking about who human beings are, is really not God-centered. You've got to know who we are in order to understand who God is. So we've got to start with our unique titles that God made us in His image. We are God image. Okay? So thinking about this, what distinguishes you and me, human beings, from other creatures? Well, in the ancient Near Eastern world, in the context when the Bible was written, kings, pharaohs, rulers would set up statues of themselves to show off their power. They would put images of themselves all over the place, and that was a tool for people to see, hey, they're the power position, they're the king. So when God wanted to declare His power over the world, what did He do? He made images. Where do kings get that idea from? God made images of Himself, and the royal image, the kingdom image, the thing that really is to show forth His power are men and women, human beings. We are the image of God. So that's huge. We're His royal image. We are dignified in that we're made in the image of God, but we're humble in that we're not God. We're just like the statues that a ruler would make. We're not the thing itself. So thinking through that and understanding that secular humanism today has sought to eliminate God and say, hey, you don't need God. You are your own God. You make your truth. Well, those guys are saying that obviously don't lift weights. Because weights beat you down. They tell you, you are not everything. You're not super. Weights break down your muscles and teach you you're not big and bad. The most humble person ought to be the one who is training. It teaches you, I need to progress. I need to grow. It's a humbling experience. we're not equal to our Creator. We're just images. We're just copies. We're pictures. And so you think about that, humility grows in admitting, like we said last week, I need help. I need to grow. I need to develop. And so thinking through that, not only listening to someone else, but listening to God and letting Him define you and read your label, which is going to give you humility, but also dignity. What's the image of God? Well, think about the material that God used. You know, when kings would make images themselves, they might use gold, silver, diamonds, powerful, exorbitant, expensive, lavish statues and pictures. Well, God used dirt. We're made out of dust. And so when you think about in our culture, what's developed in a rebellion against God is we have this class system. We have a situation where we have people who are viewed as greater or worse. And we try to prop ourselves up. We're not running around like kings with statues of yourselves around town. Most of us aren't, unless we're a Heisman winner here in Norman, Oklahoma. But we do have Instagram. We have social media. We can craft this power position of ourselves to let everyone know that we're kings. We're somebody. We're important. So God lets the world know His fame by people. Every single person. There's no small people. There's no unimportant people. There's no people who don't deserve dignity because we are image of God. But we're humble. We're made out of the most basic, everyday material, which is dust of the earth, dirt. We're fragile. We're humble. No one is bigger than other people because we all come from the same origin. We're all from the same people. None of us are bigger and badder and better. There's a leveling that comes to a biblical definition or a label, which is image of God. It's a humbling. And so if we don't submit to a creator, but create our own way forward, that's actually the way towards racism. Because we don't have an objective starting point, an objective reality where we're all on the same level here. We're going to actually judge each other according to our performance, our clothing, our skin color, or maybe, everyone knows racism is wrong now except the weirdos. Maybe it's the people. Maybe we judge each other according to our education or our sophistication level. Like, oh, those are the bad guys out there because they don't get it. And so we all exclude people. We have an inner circle mentality because we don't get that at the core we're image of God. We think that our performance really defines us versus our Creator. And the indicative is going to drive the imperative. So we can't DIY this. We can't make ourselves up. We got to read the label. We just can't slap a label on ourselves and call it something that we're not. We get our label from our Maker. We can't decide what we want to be. We have to let Him decide what we are and define us. So if we don't like hell, if we don't like what the Bible says about salvation, we want to think we can just step over that, step around that, and make our own reality because we like it better. And where does that lead? Treating people as less than what we are. People neglecting other people, not seeing them. When I was a college minister at OU, I would always run around and I would see people who look like me because they're easy to relate to, but I would not see people who don't look like me. And we all do that. We look for people that we can relate to, that we can identify with, and we all sort of exclude others. When you walk into a room, if you believe that what makes a valid mate, a valid girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse is appearance, then you're going to start to exclude 97% of the people in the room from the outset. And it's not about what they're labeled as according to God, that they have dignity and worth. It's about how you label them according to their body parts or the superficial characteristics you see, hair color, skin color, muscles, those kind of things. So you got to think about, what do we do that we don't even think about? Where do we get our ideas of reality and who people are? We're absolutely all culpable and guilty in valuing other people according to the labels we put on them and not what God's put on us. Okay, so thinking through that, you can't forget that we are an image. As we learn more about the universe, as we learn more about ourselves, we've got to realize how small we are. We look at God's creation, the mountains, the valleys, the Grand Canyon, the great superstructures that we build, and we zoom out and start to look at how small the earth is. We've gone to the moon. We have not gone to any other planets with people on them. Like we cannot get there because we are so stinking small. We are humble, but amazing because we're image bearers. Okay, so thinking through that, you got to think about first, we are a humble people. None of us are better than each other, and we got to realize that imaging, that label that we have on ourselves, comes from God, not from us. So thinking about what all else are besides images, well, think about what the image is. It's the image of God. So we're not just humble because we're images. We're not the thing itself. We are dignified. What are we to represent? God himself. Okay, we're not just ooze from ooze that's going back into ooze, or dirt that's going in that lucky dirt. We're the lucky mud, the lucky ooze that's developed and evolved into people. Okay, human beings. That is a lack of dignity right there. If we're not uniquely made, created, and designed in the image of God, then we're in the image of nothing. We have no transcendent meaning. We're just going to be forgotten. Do you know? Pause the tape. Can you? If I quiz you right now, can you tell me your great grandmother and great grandfather's names, first names? No, because they're forgotten. You go back another generation if you can do that. Go back. No, we're forgotten. We're small. We're nothing. Okay. But God knows us. You may not know the people who come before you, but God does. They're His image, and they bear dignity and purpose and power. What happens when you remove the dignity? We turn to drugs, drunkenness, even suicide. When we lose who we are, what we are, and racism, elitism. We treat people with no dignity. And we view people as nobodies. And we view ourselves as nobodies. We start to look at income, clothes, possessions, education, career. Well, the thing that really ought to define us is our label. Again, our label. What's written upon us? Image of God. We look in the mirror and we're disappointed. We start to think about self-hatred. Thinking about our body image episode we went through. We talked about how the answer is not just telling yourself when you have body image struggles, hey, these are some great things about my image, but it's looking to Christ, that He values me, that God values me, versus what I can tell myself or what somebody else can tell me about me. The only thing that's ultimately going to, at the end of the day, going to win the day and deliver me from body image obsession is that God Himself cares about me. So think about this. You are an image bearer of God. You are loved by God and proclaim His glory. Richard Pratt, in this book I want to recommend, makes this very point, which is life-changing to me. It's called Design for Dignity. Especially chapter 1, as you go through it, he mentions a challenge to you. Why don't you go up to somebody today in light of this idea that these people around you are images of God, and say to him or her, "Good day, Your Majesty," because they are an image bearer of God. They have unique dignity and worth. And so thinking through that, you really got to start thinking about who the people are around you. They are images of the Almighty, the King, the Creator, the true King. And so if we treat people according to the label that God puts on them, not the labels that we put on them, we're going to treat them in a much better way. If you're at the gym and you're thinking through, man, this guy is just sitting on the squat rack, checking his phone, wasting my time because it's my turn, I want to kill him, that's not treating him as an image bearer of God or image of God. And so thinking about what happened this week in Norman, I mean, nobody killed anybody because of their race. What'd they do? They attacked images, statues, buildings associated with the people that they're trying to spew hatred at, right? Which is, we get the message. You're hitting at images, structures, material things, not the person themselves, but we are so, because we're in the image of God, we're so connected to the images that to attack the image is to attack the very thing itself, the very person itself. And that's the same thing. When we attack an image of God, we hate an image of God, we're attacking God. We're ultimately dissing God versus the person. James 3 makes this very super clear. It says, with our mouths we bless our Lord and Father, and with that same tongue in our mouths we curse people who are made in the image of God. You see, this image of God drives the imperative. don't curse a person or cease to bless a person because the person is in the image of God. It says, from the same mouth come cursing and blessing, my brothers. These things should not be so. The question is why? Why should they not be so? Is it just because they should be so or shouldn't be so? Is it just because? No, that's not a valid reason. Kids will ask you why? Why, Daddy? Why, Mommy? Why? Well, the answer is we cannot curse image of God. This is who you're labeled as. Every single one of us, no matter what we believe, is a valid image of God. As much as we distorted that or run from that, no one can escape that they are a creature in the image of God. And so we may be confused about who we are or who others are, and we vacillate between degrading ourselves or feeling like we're overly important. That's because we get out of line of what we are, image of God. Humble, because we're image. Dignified, because we are in the image of God. That's a beautiful, wonderful point. I'm thankful for Richard Pratt. We're going to move into the second point here, is that as we're going through the Ten Commandments, we're also going to examine the Ten Commandments of the Bible. Because if you want to give Christianity a fair shot, you ought to know what the Ten Commandments are. Now, we mentioned last week, the first one was, you shall have no other gods before me. But the second one is, you shall not make for yourself a carved image or a graven image or any likeness of anything that's heaven above, earth below, etc., etc., etc. And you shall not bow down and serve those images, for the Lord your God is a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. So the big idea here is, don't make an image of God and worship it. Now that seems like an odd thing to put number 2, right? The gods, I get that one, but making an image of God, anything, making some representation of God and then worshiping it, wouldn't that be helpful? Like, wouldn't it be helpful to have a target to shoot at, something you can look at and say, oh, okay, I'm going to worship this. Why is that absurd to God? Why is that offensive to God? Well, you think about you. You are more than the pictures that are on your social media, that are on your wall. You're more than the pictures that are the ideas that people have about you. Actually, you're more than the caricatures that people have about you. Doesn't it grate on your nerves when people say, "Well, Justin's just like this," or "Stevie's just like this." You're that. You do this all the time. You're always like this. Well, thinking about people in those generalized ways dehumanizes the people, because it cannot communicate the complexity and the reality of that person. Now, when people want to paint God as like the big grandfather in the sky, the old man with a beard, or Jesus on the cross, the crucifix, that is out of line for God. Why is that? Because it's a statue. It's not a reality. The images that God's given of himself are his people. People are the image, not the things we want to make, because those can't represent the thing in of itself, just like you can't really represent a person by some kind of picture you create. So thinking about that, why would that offend God? Same reason it offends you when people minimize you, and that's why defacing statues is a big deal, because they do represent. And so when we start to represent God with an image, you know what? They could be good images, bad images, but they're images of him. And so there's better or worse. We're going to start to believe that is God. That the Jesus we've seen in a movie, or the Jesus we've seen on a crucifix, is the Jesus, but that cannot represent the complexity of Jesus, because what makes Jesus Jesus is that he is human and he's divine. You cannot represent that in an image. And that's why this book right here, the Westminster Larger Catechism, we actually plugged this last week, a commentary. It's going to be in the show notes again. It really does help you walk through why this is an important commandment, why we need to understand it. Think about this. You might think, well, some people can't read, some people aren't as sophisticated, and so an image would just be helpful for them to say, hey, this is what Jesus is doing, this is what God is, so let's make an image of him so we can represent him in stories that we tell. Listen, God's not visible to us, and that's by design. There's no image that makes him visible. Think of this. What if a woman whose husband's off at war wants to invite another man over to be an image of her husband, to help her to know her husband and remind her of who her husband is, and shares life with her husband? Well, that's not her husband. That's a copy. You can't just make a copy of somebody and that be the person itself. It's not the thing. That's awful. That's a dumb example, because that is what we might do when we have an image of God, or it's not the thing. So God won't be reduced. He won't be characterized. He won't be marginalized. God hates that. We hate that. You can get more out of actually just reading the truth of who God is than putting an image before yourself and saying that's who God is. So let's listen to what it says in this very commandment. It says, don't bow down and serve them, for I am the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Now you want that. You might think, well, jealous, that doesn't sound good. Well, look, who's he jealous for? His image bearers. He's jealous for people who treat his image bearers wrong. You think about God is love. How do you know God's love? Because of his relation to us. He defends his people. He will not let his people be mistreated. He will vindicate all of his people. He will bring justice. So the fact that God is just is a huge concept, but you can't represent that with an image. You have to hear the story. You have to read the text and look at it. I'm a jealous God. Now think about this. What else does it say? It says, but I'm showing steadfast love to those who love me. To thousands, in fact. He is full of love for his people. Steadfast love, unmoving, unwavering, covenantal love, committed love. He will not let you go to those who love him. Even when you're unlovable, he's going to be for you. That's who God is. And the fact is, it's not because we keep these commandments that he is committed to us. It's that he's committed to us that we're going to be able to keep these commandments. We got to get that order right. The indicative leads to the imperative. You can't ever want to do these commandments if you don't know that you're a sinner, that you have rebelled against God, but he sends his son in our flesh in order to redeem us from our own rebellion and to rescue us from our own rebellion. That is the key of the gospel. Once you know the gospel, these commandments aren't like just a bunch of hard rules that you can't do, don't ever want to do. They become a delight to us because this is the one who has redeemed us. So you're thinking through the Word of God and the images of God, we got to go to his truth, his text, and not to a picture. Just like we don't want to be marginalized, God doesn't want to be marginalized. In fact, it's to our detriment to do that. So when we worship God, we worship him in spirit and in truth. And so we're very word focused. We ought to be word focused. So getting into the Bible and understanding it is going to be helpful. So if you want to know more about Genesis, I'm going to give you a good book recommendation right now. We've looked at what is our label. It's our image of God. So thinking through that, if you want to go to Genesis and look at in more depth about what it's saying, the Kingdom Prologue by Meredith Kline is a great resource. Kingdom Prologue, Meredith Kline, awesome. We've got a very volatile place to be here. We've got a lot of hatred, a lot of hurt, a lot of misunderstanding about people, and this is our culture. Thinking about, just to wrap it up here, one of my favorite shows of all time is The Office. On the very first season of the show, they have a meeting at work, and the episode's called Diversity Day. And it is a very funny, ridiculous episode where they hit on this sensitivity about race, religion, culture. And if you haven't seen it, go see it. But I almost want to think right now, this show was put out, 10 or so years ago. I almost think in the current climate, it would be probably impossible for that show to get produced at this time because of the heightened sense of racism and oversensitivity, or not valid sensitivity about these issues, because we are kind of crying out for answers here. We know racism is wrong. We know hating other people based on skin color is wrong. We know white nationalism is wrong. We know these things are wrong, but why? Why is the answer? And the why is going to not only help you to have more categories in your mind, but it's going to every day help you to love other people. That's what we're made for. We're made to love God and love other people. And so if we're not healthy spiritually and understanding our label, reading our label, commandment number 2, read the label, we're not gonna be putting in the right things into this mix of health in our lives, which is relational, physical, spiritual, mental health. If you're thinking through that, you're thinking through like, I need to actually understand who I am, and I can't just make it up for myself. I need to go to the label that's been placed on me, that's existed before I got here and will exist after I leave here. That each and every person, no matter color, male, female, in the image of God. That's who you are. You're an image of God. And with that said, you can be a disobedient image of God, or you can be an obedient image of God. Well, the thing is, none of us do it perfectly, and so that's why I got to go to Jesus, who is the only infallible representation of who God is. He brings the invisible to life and to be visible. He did it on earth, and now we've got it in His Word. So that's the greatest news you could ever read and ever hear. And if you want to hear more about that, please look me up. Hit us up on the Fully Alive Podcast at gmail.com. Like, comment, subscribe. We really need your help to get those subscribers up, to get to over 100 subscribers, and get the YouTube channel really hitting on all cylinders. We're also on Overcast, Anchor, iTunes, podcasts, anywhere else you listen to podcasts, so you can listen to us, but also you can watch us on your YouTube. And we'll have more guests and more stuff, good material coming up for you very soon, every week. So now that we've gone through it, first commandment, listen only to your trainer, listen to your coach. And then 2, read the labels, understanding what each and every person is, and actually what we are putting in our bodies, hugely important. So thinking through 2 commandments, we'll be hitting number 3 next week. So in conclusion, join us in ending racism. It cannot be allowed to stand, but we need to have more than just, hey, outrage. We need to be part of the solution, which means knowing who we are, reading our own label, believing in our dignity and our humility, and dignifying others because they are image of God. Having the humility to see that we are just on the same level as everybody else. No one's any better. No one. Seeing that, we can end hatred, racism, because of who God has made us to be, what we were made to be, created to be, in love and relational health. Yeah. Racism, dysfunction. Love, image of God, functionally good. All right. So thinking through that, let's end racism together by being a countercultural community, a fully alive community, because we're made to live fully alive, built to worship the living one. Don't be gullible, read the label.